For success in e-commerce, you have to have a really good understanding of not only like what's happening, but why it's happening, and then be able to like action that in a way that's actually going to improve the customer experience.
Welcome to another episode of the E-commerce Toolbox Experts Perspective. Joining us today, we have some internal experts. So I'll let them introduce themselves, but we have two Noibu experts here today. So welcome, Anna and Tina.
Thanks, Robin. Hi, Kaylin.
Tina, why don't you kick us off with a brief introduction, your career from a high level, who you are, and your journey at Noibu.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm a product manager here at Noibu, and I've worked in product and e-commerce for a while now. And previous to that, I actually worked in UX and product research. And it's actually the intersection of those two disciplines that I really love. I love learning about people behavior and motivations. And then like the fact that I can use those insights then to build useful products and solve real problems, that's what's really satisfying for me. So that's what gets me excited.
I'm Anna. I'm a UX designer here. I've spent most of my career working on long-term visions and thinking about how products can evolve to better suit the needs of users. So doing this research with Tina was really exciting because it allowed me to get a really good glimpse of how things are actually working for users and how their workflows happen day to day. So we can incorporate that into how we grow and evolve.
Amazing. So for those that are a first-time listener, today I'll do a brief introduction. My name's Kaylin, one of the co-founders, president at Noibu. Historically, we've been known as an error monitoring company. So our first product line was really the prioritization and the quantification of technical front-end issues. And that's really where we bet the farm for multiple years. And we are the best in the market in commerce by far for this niche use case. About 18 months ago, we started doing some research, thinking, and we wanted to really expand and go from a point solution to a platform solution, which we'll talk about today. I won't get too much into Anna and Tina's part. And really why we wanted to bring them on today is because we wanted to talk about this transition and talk about where Noibu has gone and where we are headed. And a lot of it was on the back of phenomenal research done by Tina and Anna. So we want to hear from them firsthand. So my first question to you, and Anna, we can start it off with you, is for you on the product side, what sparked the realization that error monitoring might not actually be enough? And how did we start from your perspective doing the research there?
Yeah, so I've been at Noibu for coming up to a year soon. And I came in at a really pivotal time where we were already starting to speak to users and really understand how a point solution for error monitoring wasn't enough to really solve their everyday problems, which are focused on conversion. So Tina and I have been working really closely, and we realized that research was really important. A next step for us to better understand what's actually happening in their day-to-day lives and their work and their decision-making, and how Noibu can help support that even further. So I can let Tina talk a little bit more about the details of what triggered that, because her research background, she was really able to pinpoint what we needed to look at.
Kick us off, Tina, because I know you were very instrumental. You worked with our SLT team on this, and I just wanted to get from Anna's perspective, but I'm very curious from your perspective, Tina, because you are very much boots on the ground for this.
I mean, it was a team effort. It always is. But I think what sparked it all is it came from a combination of observing how customers were currently using Noibu and then talking to them about what their broader goals were. And what we saw was that teams, they were reacting to the issues that we were surfacing, but they weren't thinking them in terms of just this bug or this issue, right? Instead, they were thinking about things like lost revenue or broken funnels. They really want to understand the overall business impact. So the questions that we were hearing were closer to hey, did this error cause a drop in add to carts yesterday, right? And from a prioritization standpoint, nobody was really asking things like, oh, I wonder how many JavaScript errors I have, right? They were instead asking hey, why is my checkout down 8%? So I think what we were seeing was that errors mattered, right? They're very important, but they're only one piece of a much larger story. And we know that having an error-free site, that's table stakes, right? But it didn't really guarantee success. And it was that gap that made us realize that, yes, we were solving a real problem, but we were probably framing the problem too narrowly. So I think to truly help customers optimize and grow their e-commerce business, we needed to expand our focus. And we needed to start defining success using the same mental models as what our customers were doing.
Makes sense. And I think for us, it dawned on us largely on the back of your research and some other folks as well that the pyramid isn't errors. Errors is the base of the pyramid and it's stability, right? Stability, like you need an error-free website or a low error rate website. You need to be able to transact, make sense. From there, it needs to be fast, right? And as we've kind of gone up the Maslow's hierarchy of needs for commerce folks, it's kind of led us down this evolution that we're going down now. So no, that makes a lot of sense, Tina. Anna, question for you. For the user discovery process, how did you decide who to speak to and why?
Yeah, so we really wanted to make sure that we talked to users beyond our current technical user base. So we talked to marketing, UX, product, merchandisers, but also the leaders that have to take all these perspectives into consideration as they balance and prioritize in the organization. We also wanted to make sure that we talked to users outside of Noibu. So the goal was to really get an unbiased perspective on how people are dealing with commerce optimization and conversion optimization in the real day. So yeah, we were really targeted to make sure that we were talking to both the breadth and people who are deep in the weeds to understand the whole stack of what happens.
So what stuck out? Like what was some of the anecdotes or the biggest kind of things that you learned during that process?
Yeah, it was really interesting talking to a lot of different teams because they all have their different challenges, but we definitely heard very often about the same similar problem. And what we realized pretty quickly was like just how fragmented e-commerce optimization really feels for these teams, right? And we heard this common story like conversion metric goes down or revenue metric changes, and there's this like tension because you can see it right there in like your Google Analytics or your commerce dashboard. But like why it's happening is not always clear, right? So each team is going into their individual tools. Marketing is going to look at campaigns and attribution. UX is watching session replays and kind of looking at behavior. The technical teams are looking at errors in tools like Noibu. So what's happening is that the business signal is in one tool, but the explanations are in a whole bunch of different tools. And so what ends up happening is everyone's teams are kind of trying to triangulate what's happening, pulling in screenshots from their tooling, like metrics, and it all ends up in the Slack thread where everyone's trying to kind of tie this stuff together, trying to figure out what it is. But it's extremely difficult for teams to figure out what's actually happening because they don't all map back to the same impact, right? And figuring out which parts are actually impactful is really hard. So I think for that investigative aspect, it was really hard for teams and very fragmented. But it wasn't just in the investigation. We also saw when it came to like prioritizing opportunities. Each team is kind of like working in their lane and is proposing changes to their areas. Like, let's do this new campaign. Let's make this adjustment to the website. Let's fix these technical errors. And it's really difficult for the organization as a whole to prioritize those initiatives because they don't have a clear sense of how that all ties back to impact and the true revenue and conversion that could have for their website. So we were finding that a lot of teams were really struggling with this. And what ends up happening is they kind of end up swimming in their own lane, making changes that are really easy to explain or easy to measure locally. And some of the bigger initiatives or some of the more impactful changes might get missed. And then for teams that are working with agencies, this kind of just got worse because that asset and resource is kind of sometimes limited. And so prioritization became even more important. So that was really like a common pattern we saw amongst almost everyone we talked to. And it was really interesting and insightful for helping guide how we think about our platform today.
If you're listening to the e-commerce toolbox, you're entitled to a podcast-exclusive website audit. Go to noibu.com/podcast-audit for a free scan that uncovers the hidden friction blocking your conversions and shows you where you're leaking revenue.
On the back of all this customer research, well, user and customer research, Tino, I read your product briefing on the back of that, right? If you had to kind of summarize it in a few sentences, like what was kind of the conclusion, either from the most surprising or the most impactful insight and conclusion from all of that research?
Yeah, I think like very similar to what Anna was just talking about. I think one of the biggest surprises for me was just how like analytics driven, but insights poor a lot of the teams felt. So it's not a lack of data, right? Like they have access to a lot of data, but they still have very little clarity, right? And we know that for success in e-commerce, you have to have a really good understanding of not only like what's happening, but why it's happening, and then be able to like action that in a way that's actually going to improve the customer experience. But what we saw was that today, getting to that outcome is really hard and incredibly fragmented. There doesn't seem to be like a single place where all of those signals are coming together, especially in a way that feels actionable for people. Right. And again, just to iterate something that Anna was talking about, we saw that ownership is shared, right? It depends on collaboration between a lot of different teams, right? There's product, there's merchandising, there's marketing, engineering, right? And all of that complexity together is kind of what revealed like a real opportunity for us.
Well, it's what you said. Everyone's data rich, insight poor, and the total cost of ownership between humans and systems and maintenance is, with the compressing margins of retail and like the pullback on commerce, e-com spend specifically after COVID, it's just not really sustainable. Like a lot of these tools were developed when you were hiring massive analysts teams, and like you had a chief techni, like a CTO, and you had a CDO and a marketing head, and everyone built their own empires. And like, that's just not what's happening anymore. And tools were built for that, and they were built horizontally. And it just gave us like a massive opportunity, which is one that you guys discovered. So on the back of that, do you remember for you, Tina? Because I remember for me, I'm curious, Anna, to get your take too. What was the aha moment when it just became so clear what we needed to do? Like, do you remember where you were?
I'm not sure I remember where I was. But yeah, I think it's like when we made the decision to like reframe Noibu as a broader tool, right? A broader tool for analytics and decision making. I think that's when everything kind of really changed for me because we started thinking less about just tracking errors and reporting on technical health, right? It was more about how do we evolve our data layer so that we're ingesting additional things such as like user behavior and conversions and revenue impact, right? Like everything that truly matters when you're defining success in e-commerce. And then also, like just as important, we have to move beyond just collecting the data, but actually making sense of it, right? Because we learned very quickly that the real value, it's not just in raw metrics, right? It's actually in analysis and interpretation, and then being able to give like really clear recommendations and prioritization, right? So when we made that pivot, we started asking different questions, right? We were asking things like, what if Noibu could automatically analyze everything that's happening across the site, across the purchasing funnel, right? And can we identify problems and then accurately explain why they're happening? If we can do that, then can we suggest or even take action on what to do next, right? So it's not that technical errors don't matter, right? They're still very critical, and error monitoring, like that's not going to go away, right? But the vision is evolving so that now we know that error monitoring is just like one input into like a broader intelligence system. And the focus should really be on the end goal of conversion optimization and growth.
I love that framing. Anna, on the back of what we need to do being clear, what were the steps that we needed to start taking to like actually get from where we were to where we hope to be?
Yeah, definitely. I think what Tina was mentioning about starting to think about things more holistically and really starting to think about not tasks that people need to do, but teams with business goals. When we started thinking about that framing, we realized pretty quickly that it's not just about adding new features or incremental changes to our platform, but that we need to think about a system, right? And a system that's going to do something that no other tool really does out there today, or the ones that are trying are not necessarily serving as well as they could. And so we decided that we needed to build a concept car, a vision, something that could help us explore what this future would look like and rally around as an internal team. So that's been proven to be a really powerful artifact where we were able to pull in the learnings from this research and from other conversations we've had with customers in the past. And we've used this internally to help align teams because it's a tough problem to solve. There's a reason, right, that these solutions maybe don't exist today. And it means that we as a team in Noibu have to build with that same cohesiveness and that same coming together and impact as we're hoping that this tool does for our e-commerce teams. And so that's been really helpful. It's also been great because we've been able to use that tool to show to our e-commerce design partners, get early feedback, show to our customer advisory panel. And all of that feedback's been really promising and really exciting, that it seems like we're on the right path. And that's also been really constructive because we've also heard things that we could do better in the ways we're thinking, and we're already making those changes. And it's been really interesting because these ideas and these concepts that we've been able to rally around, you're going to already see them infiltrating some of the features and the updates that are coming out within months. So the velocity it gives us and the possibility to really build something different has been really exciting.
And I love that video. I always show that to folks. And you sound a little bit like Morgan Freeman.
Yeah, I had to train for a long time to get my voice to not sound weird.
It's like the voice of God. It's a great video. Honestly, it's really, really good.
Yeah, lots of hard work amongst many people.
And really on the back of that, I think we're obviously being very public about this now, but this isn't like, hey, we made this decision last week and we're going public. We wanted to make sure that we made the decision, hire the right people to execute and put the right resources against it, execute against the vision, and then announce it. So if you're listening to this and you're an existing customer, these are things that are largely in field today or coming shortly, as Anna just mentioned. For me, it's very clear that the school of thought in commerce is starting to really diverge. You either want to have siloed business units, have internal engineering, and build like almost like a tech company under the premise of a retailer, right? And there are some companies like Amazon and Walmart that I think that have the scale to justify that. But I think most of retail is going to fall into this kind of more progressive category where you're going to pick a platform, maybe you have an SI implement it, you have a couple of engineers, but you're not going to have a team of 50. And you're not going to have specialty tools across the system, across all these different systems, especially with agentic interaction coming down the pipe. Like, how are these things you're going to like stitch together the agents? And we're also starting to see the VP of Ecom and the VP of IT becoming the same role, being a chief digital officer or VP of digital, which owns everything from tech to marketing budget. So I think the modern stack is going to look a lot more like I just described, because really it's going to drive margins and efficiency for retailers. And at the same time, I think where we want to be best in the market is not for people that are trying to build the next Amazon infrastructure, right? That's just not going to be who we're best served for. There's all these, you can implement 5 different horizontal tools so that you can kind of build your own system. But our belief is that that's going to be less than 1% of the market at some point. I think there's going to be the Etsy's of the world that have the right to do that, eBay and some other of those examples. But yeah, maybe just passing it to Tina, like, what does the future look like? I think we did a really good job of explaining how we got here and why we got here. But yeah, maybe talk us through that.
Yeah, I just want to touch also on that last thing you said. It's so true, right? Like, people are like resource constrained and everybody's looking to see how they can do more with less, right? And we want to make sure that we're able to provide value regardless of the size of your team, right? And in terms of where we're headed next, right? Like, research and discovery is always ongoing for us, right? We've made great headways with the concept car that Anna mentioned, but we believe it's critical to always stay connected to our users and to involve them throughout the entire product development process. So right now, in terms of, at least from a research perspective, the focus is a little bit more targeted, and we're spending a lot of time digging into topics such as like what insights are the most valuable and how do teams want those delivered, and then how do they actually act on them, right? We are also trying to understand the concept of trust a little bit better, because we want to make sure that teams are able to trust insights enough to act on them, especially when revenue is involved, right? So ultimately, like, our goal is for Noibu to feel more like a conversion intelligence partner, right? Not just another analytics tool in their stack. And it's through research and it's through ongoing discovery that we make sure that we're building towards that future with our users, instead of us just like guessing and making assumptions through like as we go.
I think that's such a good point. And even people we have an expression internally, we call it Steve Jobsing it, which means you just go into like a room by yourself and you come out with an idea. But even if you think about Steve Jobs, I think that's actually potentially a miss. I didn't know him, but I'm assuming that's a bit of a misrepresentation, right? I think it's always a mix of gathering data. And I think the best product folks gather data. They don't just, the customer says, hey, build this. I think that's how you end up with like the faster horse, right? So it's not like, hey, build this, but it's gathering the data and having the context and then having the courage to really like kind of try and forecast where the market's going and then meet our clients there. But I think really as we're looking to wrap this up, first off, thank you folks for joining us. Anna, Tina, you guys are amazing. Like we're really, really love having you on the team, and you guys did a phenomenal job with this research and really, really changing the trajectory of this business. And this is a strategic pivot for us, and we're doubling down. We're fully committed. We burned the boats. Obviously, user discovery is essential because at the end of the day, like no one's going to come out, go to the boardroom by themselves for 5 hours or go to a cottage and then come back with this perfect master plan. And I would encourage for you folks listening, challenge some of your assumptions, right? I think the era of best of breed point solution is coming to an end. I think it's been in decline for a few years, but I think it's really coming to an end. And I think a catalyst is not only budget cuts and all that stuff, because that stuff's more cyclical, right? So maybe budgets will come back. But you know what's not cyclical is where we're headed with the agentic movement and trying to coordinate fragmented systems and cleaning the data. I think is a losing proposition. And if you folks aren't consolidating your systems of record now, you will be in a really, really, really tough place to try and get it to work agentically. And just think of today from the products that you have the best experience with. If it has access, it starts to fail when there's data it needs to make a decision that it doesn't have access to, or it's piped in this like weird way. And that's why we really, really think we're building the plumbing and infrastructure with our new ecom analytics and monitoring platform to really power the best agentic future, because we have the data, we're cleaning the data, and we're even building it almost in like a 1.0 way, which is very critical to be able to deliver that, call it like futuristic experience. If you guys want to learn more, just reach out to me directly on LinkedIn or my email. As we look to close off, I'm curious, Anna, Tina, do you have any closing remarks? If our listeners are a lot of CDOs, CIOs, or VP of ecom or VP of digital, do you have any words of wisdom as a parting note?
I think just to touch on your last point there, like, yes, everybody wants recommendations or action, right? Like that's the end goal. But those recommendations are only going to be as good as the insights, and the insights are only as good as the data, right? So we're really building out that entire platform to enable that, knowing that the end goal is that efficiency, right? And help with prioritization.
I think, 100% the insights. But to me, it's also about the teams. And I think that it's okay to not do things the way we do them today. And it's okay for us to want a world where it's easier for us to work together, for us to prioritize together, and for us to action as a team, especially as teams get smaller and roles start crossing boundaries into different areas. And instead of putting together a deck every week and coming together with your metrics and discussing them and trying to figure out what's happening, that there's a world that we can build and get to where you can do that much quicker, you can get to insight much faster, and you can build impact faster.
Actually, a funny story as we close off. I was going to message you guys, but it was pretty late. It was 2 nights ago when the baby was up. I was reading a job description from one of our customers, and they're hiring a director of ecom, and they had all the tasks list out. And I was like, this is like really interesting, because a lot of it is very similar to what you folks have been building in your internal briefs in terms of like the jobs to be done. And Anna, what you just mentioned with like the weekly report, it's so clear to me that like we know where the puck's going on this, and we're really well positioned to take advantage because of how vertical we are. And something that I'm hoping to get going in people's heads is if your software is horizontal, meaning that it serves different industries, then the expectation of delivering the last mile of configuration is on you. And you're working for the software, and the software is not working for you. The future is very clear that it's going to be vertical and opinionated. And in the absence of vertical and opinionated, might as well chuck everything into an LLM and see what it spits back out. because that's effectively what you're going to get with horizontal software. And that's why we really, really believe that we have the right to win. And we've been investing in the underlying infrastructure to have clean data, be vertically positioned well so that it just works. And we understand your job, and we don't expect you to take your job and then have to go and train or configure the system for it to work for you. And that's why, if you're listening and you're not a customer, that's why you should be one. But thank you, folks, for joining us today. Thanks, Anna. Thanks, Tina.
Thank you, Kaylin. It was fun.
Thanks for having us.
The e-commerce toolbox Expert Perspectives is brought to you by Noibu. To find out more about Noibu and how we can help you debug your e-commerce site and rocket your revenue, visit www.noibu.com. That's Noibu.com. And then make sure to search for the e-commerce toolbox Expert Perspectives on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere else podcasts are found, and click subscribe so you don't miss out on any future episodes. On behalf of the team here at Noibu, thanks for listening.